My new manager started fining employees $50 for every minute they were late, so I made sure she paid $23,400 in fines using her own rules. The new manager arrived on a Monday in February. Her name was Cynthia Blackwell, and she'd been brought in from the corporate office in Dallas to increase efficiency and accountability at our customer service call center in Phoenix. We'd been doing fine without her. Good metrics, low turnover, decent morale. But corporate didn't care about any of that. They cared about squeezing more productivity out of fewer people. Cynthia was 43 years old, according to the company directory. She wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was always pulled back in a tight bun that made her face look severe. She had this habit of not blinking when she talked to you, just staring with these cold gray eyes until you felt like a bug under a microscope. Her first day, she called an all-staff meeting at 8 a.m. sharp. Our call center had 63 employees, customer service reps, quality assurance, a few team leads, and our old manager, Brian, who'd been moved to a different department to make room for Cynthia. We all filed into the conference room. Cynthia stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation already loaded on the screen. The first slide said, "Excellence through accountability." "Good morning," she said, not smiling. "I'm Cynthia Blackwell, your new director of operations. I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing this facility's performance data, and I have to say I'm disappointed. We'd hit 94% of our performance targets last quarter. We had the second highest customer satisfaction rating in the company, but apparently that wasn't good enough. There's a culture of laxness here," she continued. "There's a reason this facility underperforms compared to our Dallas location. People have gotten comfortable, complacent. That changes today." She clicked to the next slide. New attendance policy. My stomach sank as I read it. Employees must clock in no later than their scheduled start time. For every minute late, a $50 fine will be deducted from your paycheck. No exceptions. No excuses. Fines will be calculated automatically through the timekeeping system and deducted from the next available paycheck. Someone in the back raised their hand, a guy named Marcus from the technical support team. $50 per minute? That's not legal, is it? Cynthia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Arizona is an at-will employment state. You agreed to follow company policies when you signed your employment contract. There's a clause in Section 19 about accepting financial responsibility for policy violations. If you don't like the policy, you're free to seek employment elsewhere. The room went silent. I pulled out my phone under the table and quickly searched for employment lawyers. My hands were shaking. "What about emergencies?" someone else asked. Sarah from billing. "Like if there's an accident on the highway or a family emergency? Leave earlier. Plan for traffic. Keep a cushion in your schedule. What if we're sick? Use your sick time. Submit the request through the portal before your shift starts. If approved, no fine. If you call in sick without prior approval, the fine applies to every minute you're absent from your scheduled shift." "That's insane," someone muttered. Cynthia's head snapped toward the voice. "Who said that?" Nobody answered. "I'll say this once. This is not a democracy. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to like these policies. I need you to follow them or find employment elsewhere. Is that clear?" A few people nodded weakly. This was insane. Completely insane. But nobody said anything else. We all needed our jobs. Phoenix wasn't exactly overflowing with opportunities for customer service reps making $18.50 an hour. Cynthia clicked through more slides. New break policy. 15 minutes exactly. Time to the second. If you returned at 15 minutes and 30 seconds, that's a $25 fine for every 30 seconds late. New phone policy. Personal phones must be kept in lockers during shifts. If caught with your phone, $100 fine for the first offense, $500 for the second, termination for the third. New productivity standards. Handle 35 calls per hour instead of 25. Anything less, written warning. 3 warnings. Termination. She also implemented a new professional appearance policy. Women had to wear closed-toe shoes and blazers. Men had to wear collared shirts and ties. Hair had to be neat and professional, which apparently meant no bright colors, no unconventional styles. Violation, $200 fine. The meeting lasted an hour and 17 minutes. When it was done, everyone walked out looking shell-shocked. My coworker Jenny caught up with me in the hallway. She was 26, single mom, had been with the company for 4 years. "This is crazy, right? She can't actually do this." "I don't know. Maybe we should call HR." HR is in Dallas. They're the ones who sent her. I already asked Brian about it yesterday when he was packing up his office. He said corporate gave her full authority to implement whatever policies she wanted. "Did he say why they're doing this?" Jenny lowered her voice. "He said the Dallas office has this same system. They've had it for 2 years. Apparently productivity went up 40%, and they cut costs by 25% because people are too scared to take sick days or breaks." My throat tightened. That's not productivity. That's fear. Yeah, well, fear is cheaper than raises. The new policies started immediately. That first week, 12 people got fined for being late. The reasons didn't matter. Car trouble, sick kid, traffic accident, bus broke down. Cynthia didn't care. She'd stand by the time clock every morning with her tablet, watching everyone badge in, noting every second past the start time. On Tuesday of that first week, I watched her fine a woman named Patricia $250 because Patricia was 5 minutes late after her diabetic daughter had a medical emergency that morning. Patricia was in her 50s, had worked for the company for 14 years. She stood there crying, trying to explain. "My daughter's blood sugar dropped to 42. She couldn't stand up. I had to get her stabilized before I could leave." Cynthia just kept tapping on her tablet. "You should have called in sick on your daughter's behalf before your shift started. That's what the policy says. Policy is policy. I didn't know if I'd need to call in. I thought I could get her stable and still make it on time. Poor planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine. Patricia's hands were shaking. I've never been late before. Not in 14 years. Then you've had 14 years to learn the importance of punctuality. The fine stands. I wanted to say something. My mouth was open. But then I thought about my own bills, my own rent, and I closed it again. I hated myself for it. The fines came out of our next paycheck. Patricia lost $250 from a $2,400 paycheck. The company could do it because buried in our employment contracts was a clause about accepting financial responsibility for policy violations. None of us had ever read it carefully. Why would we? The old policies were reasonable. 5 minutes late, Brian would just say, try to get here on time tomorrow. Nobody got fired. Nobody got fined. By the end of February, morale was destroyed. People were terrified. They started showing up 30 minutes early and sitting in their cars, waiting until exactly the right moment to badge in. Not too early because Cynthia also had a rule about no unauthorized overtime, but not 1 second late. The parking lot became this weird limbo zone where everyone sat in their cars, watching the clock on their phones, waiting for 7:58 a.m. to arrive so they could safely walk in. I managed to avoid fines for the first month by leaving my apartment at 6:15 a.m. for a 8:00 a.m. shift. The drive normally took 25 minutes. I gave myself almost 2 hours of buffer time. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot reading a book, drinking gas station coffee, watching the sun come up. Then March happened. On March 4th, I left at 6:15 like always. Traffic was normal. I was making good time. I was listening to a podcast, something about true crime, half paying attention. Then at 7:42 a.m., 18 minutes before my shift, my car started making a horrible grinding noise. Metal on metal, like something was tearing itself apart. The engine light came on, then the check engine light, then the oil light. I pulled over on the shoulder of the I-10, right near the 43rd Avenue exit. Cars were whipping past me doing 70. My heart was pounding against my ribs. My hands were shaking as I called roadside assistance. The automated system put me on hold for 12 minutes. 12 minutes of my buffer time evaporating while I listened to elevator music. Finally, a person answered. We can have someone there by 9 a.m. I need someone sooner. I have to be at work by 8 a.m. I'm sorry, that's the earliest available slot. I hung up and called the office. Got Cynthia's voicemail. This is Cynthia Blackwell. I don't check voicemails. Send an email or text to my work number. I sent a text. Car broke down on I-10 near 43rd Ave. Called roadside assistance. Earliest they can come is 9 a.m. Will be late. Can I use sick time? No response. I tried calling my team lead, a woman named Veronica. No answer. Everyone was already at their desks, logged into the phone system, not allowed to have personal phones. I sat there on the shoulder of the highway, watching the minutes tick by. 7:51, 7:56, 8, 8:03. Each minute was $50. I was watching my money drain away in real time. At 8:12 a.m., I called an Uber. It would cost $47 to get to work, but that was better than waiting until 9 was and losing thousands in fines. The Uber arrived at 8:24. We got stuck in traffic near the 19th Avenue exit. Construction had narrowed everything to 1 lane. At 8:47 a.m., a tow truck finally showed up at my car, but I was already gone. He called me. I had to coordinate getting my car towed to a shop while sitting in the back of an Uber, trying to calculate how much money I was about to lose. I got to work at 9:33 a.m., 93 minutes late. Cynthia was waiting at my desk. She was holding her tablet. She had this expression on her face, not quite a smile, but something satisfied, like she'd been waiting for someone to screw up this badly. Badge in, please. My car broke down. I sent you a text at 7:44. I tried to call. I got here as fast as I could. Badge in. I badged in. 9:33 a.m. My shift started at 8 a.m. Cynthia tapped on her tablet for what felt like forever. Then she turned it to show me the screen. $4,150 in fines. 93 minutes at $50 per minute. My vision went blurry. The number didn't look real. $4,150. That's half my monthly salary. You should have taken an Uber immediately when the car broke down. I was on the highway. I didn't know how bad it was. I had to wait for roadside assistance to make sure it was safe. Not my problem. Policy is policy. I felt sick, actually physically sick. My hands were trembling and my stomach was churning and I thought I might throw up right there. $4,650. Cynthia, please. I'll work through lunch for a week. I'll stay late every day. I'll make up the time. The fine stands. Get to your desk. I sat down at my desk and logged into the phone system. My first call was a woman screaming about her internet bill. She'd been charged for a technician visit she never requested. I could barely focus on what she was saying. My brain was stuck on that number. $4,650. That was my car payment. That was my rent. That was groceries for 2 months. At lunch, I went to my car. The Uber had dropped me off. My real car was at a shop somewhere, and I just sat in the parking lot and cried for 15 minutes exactly. I set a timer on my phone to make sure I didn't go over. Crying on company time would probably get me fined too. That night, I started looking for other jobs, but the market was terrible. Everyone was hiring but paying $12, $14 an hour for the same work, and I couldn't afford to quit without something lined up, especially not now that I was about to lose half my paycheck. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Cynthia systematically destroy people. She fined a guy named Terrell $30,500 for being 70 minutes late when his mother had a stroke, and he drove her to the hospital. He tried to explain. My mom was on the floor, She couldn't move her right side. I called 911, but I couldn't just leave her there alone. You should have called in sick before your shift. I didn't know she was having a stroke until it happened. It was 7:30 in the morning. Then you should have made a better choice about your priorities. Terrell quit 2 days later. She fined a woman named Kim $2,000 for taking a phone call from her son's school during work hours. Kim's phone had been in her locker like it was supposed to be, but the school called the office main line because it was an emergency. Kim's 8-year-old son had fallen off the monkey bars and broken his arm. The school needed permission to take him to the hospital. Kim took the call at her desk because the receptionist transferred it to her. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. At $500 per minute for phone violations, Cynthia had increased the fine in March. That was $2,000. My son broke his arm, Kim said, her voice shaking. You should have told them to call you back during your designated break time. He's 8 years old and screaming in pain. That's not my concern. The policy clearly states no personal calls during work hours. Kim also quit. She fined our entire quality assurance team with $1,500 each because they were in a mandatory meeting that Cynthia herself had scheduled. But the meeting ran long and they got back to their desks 2 minutes after their scheduled break ended. 30 people, 2 minutes each. At $50 per minute, $45,000 in fines total in 1 day. When they protested, Cynthia said, "You should have left the meeting when your break time ended. You told us we couldn't leave until you dismissed us." I don't recall saying that. There are 30 witnesses. The fine stands. People started quitting, 12 people in March alone, 15 in April. Cynthia didn't care. She just hired cheaper replacements from a temp agency and trained them with the same ruthless efficiency. The new people made $14 an hour instead of $18.50. They were more desperate. They tolerated more. The ones who stayed became paranoid. We were all terrified of breaking some rule we didn't know existed. Cynthia kept adding new policies, posting them in the break room on Friday afternoon so we'd have the weekend to review and internalize them before they went into effect Monday morning. No talking between desks unless work-related. No personal items visible on your workspace except one photo in a frame no larger than 4x6 inches. No eating at your desk outside of designated break times. No adjusting the thermostat. No using the bathroom except during scheduled breaks unless you had a documented medical condition. No wearing perfume or cologne. No chewing gum. No visible tattoos. No facial hair longer than a 1/4 inch. Every new rule came with a fine attached, usually $100, $500 depending on severity. And the thing is, Cynthia didn't follow her own rules. I started noticing it in early April. On April 3rd, I arrived at 7:30 a.m. like always, sat in my car until 7:58, then walked in and badged in at 7:59 a.m. Perfect timing. As I walked to my desk, I passed Cynthia's office. The door was open, the lights were off. Her desk was empty. At 8:03 a.m., I saw her walk through the front door. She was carrying a Starbucks coffee and a paper bag from Panera. She was on her personal cell phone, laughing about something. I could see the time on the wall clock behind the reception desk. 8:03 a.m. She was late, 3 minutes late. I didn't say anything, just filed it away in my brain and went to my desk. The next day, same thing. She arrived at 8:07 a.m. The day after that, 8:12 a.m. I started keeping a log, not officially, just notes in my phone during bathroom breaks. Cynthia's arrival times. April 3rd, 8:03 a.m., 3 min late. April 4, 8:07 a.m., 7 min late. April 5, 8:12 a.m., 12 min late. April 8, 8:05 a.m., 5 min late. April 9, 8:18 a.m., 18 min late. I also started noticing other things. She took 45-minute lunches when everyone else got 15 minutes. I timed it. She left at 12 p.m. and didn't come back until 12:47 p.m. every single day. She left at 4:30 p.m. when our shifts ended at 5. I watched her pack up her Louis Vuitton bag and walk out while the rest of us were still on calls. She took personal calls constantly. I could hear her through her office door, which she left open like she wanted us to hear. Calls with her husband about dinner plans. Calls with her personal trainer about rescheduling appointments. Calls with her hairdresser about highlights. Sometimes these calls lasted 20 or 30 minutes. She had her husband's 50th birthday party catered in the conference room during work hours on April 15th. Invited only the senior staff from Dallas who were visiting for quarterly reviews. The rest of us had to work through it while we could smell catered Italian food and hear them laughing. None of this would matter in a normal workplace. Managers have some flexibility. That's fine. But Cynthia had made the rules absolute. No exceptions. No excuses. She'd stood in front of us and said, "Policy is policy," probably 200 times. By mid-April, I'd documented 2 weeks of Cynthia violating her own attendance policy. She was late by at least 5 minutes every single day, some days by 20 or 30 minutes. I did the math on my phone calculator during my 15-minute break, sitting in my car in the parking lot. April 15, 187 minutes late total. At $50 per minute, that's $9,350 in fines, but she wasn't paying them. The automated system that tracked our badge times and calculated our fines apparently didn't apply to her. I started documenting everything else too. On April 11th, I used my phone to take a photo through her office window. She was sitting at her desk, feet up, personal phone pressed to her ear, laughing. The timestamp on the photo, 2:47 p.m. She'd been on that call since 2:30. I'd walked past her office 3 times. On April 14th, I noted that she ate lunch at her desk, a salad from Whole Foods, eaten at 12:15 p.m. while she typed on her computer. According to her own policy posted in the break room, eating at desks outside designated break times is prohibited. On April 16th, She left at 4:18 p.m. I was at my desk on a call, and I watched her walk out. She didn't badge out, just left. The time clock showed she was supposed to be there until 5 p.m. I had photos. I had timestamps. I had witnesses, though most people were too scared to say anything on the record. By April 22nd, I had a file on my phone with 63 documented violations, every single one timestamped, dated, with photo evidence where possible. On April 18th, Cynthia called another all-staff meeting. We filed into the conference room at 3 p.m. She had another PowerPoint ready. I've noticed productivity has dropped since I implemented the new policies, she said. Our calls per hour have decreased by 8% compared to February. This is unacceptable. Of course, productivity had dropped. Everyone was so stressed about the rules that we couldn't focus on actually helping customers. We were rushing through calls to hit the quota, and customers were complaining that we weren't listening to them. Starting next Monday, anyone who fails to meet the 35 calls per hour minimum will be fined $500 per day. Additionally, any customer satisfaction rating below 90% will result in a $250 fine. Someone raised their hand. How are we supposed to maintain satisfaction if we're rushing through calls? That's not my problem. Figure it out. Jenny whispered to me, this is going to bankrupt people. She was right. Between the attendance fines, the phone fines, the productivity fines, and now the customer satisfaction fines, people were going to end up owing the company money instead of getting paid. That night, I made a decision. I went home to my apartment, opened my laptop, and spent 4 hours reading the entire employee handbook, all 247 pages of it. I'd never read it before. Nobody had. It was boring corporate language written by lawyers, but I read every single word, and I found something interesting. Section 14.3. All company policies apply equally to all employees, regardless of position, seniority, or status. Managers and directors are expected to model exemplary compliance with all policies and will be held to the same standards as frontline staff. Section 22.7. Employees have the right to report policy violations through the Anonymous Ethics Hotline. All reports will be investigated by the corporate HR department within 30 days. Retaliation against employees who file reports is strictly prohibited and will result in immediate termination. There was also Section 8.12. Documentation of policy violations should include dates, times, and specific details of the violation. Photo or video evidence is encouraged where applicable. Employees who submit well-documented reports may be eligible for commendation. I had everything I needed. I had dates, I had times, I had photos, I had witnesses, even if they were too scared to speak up publicly. On April 22nd, I called the Corporate Ethics Hotline. The number was buried on page 198 of the handbook, in the appendix, in 8-point font, which is probably why nobody ever used it. A woman answered on the third ring. Corporate Ethics Hotline. This call may be recorded for quality assurance. How can I help you? My heart was pounding. My hands were sweating. This was the moment. Once I did this, there was no going back. I need to report policy violations by a manager. What type of violations are we talking about? Multiple violations of company attendance policies. Also personal phone usage during work hours, extended breaks, early departures, eating at desk during non-break times. All violations of policies that this manager created and enforces strictly on other employees but doesn't follow herself. I see. Can you provide specific documentation? I have dates, times, photographic evidence, and witness confirmation for 63 separate incidents over the last 2 months. There was a pause. I heard typing. 63 incidents? Yes, ma'am. Some days had multiple violations. And you have documentation for all of them? Yes, ma'am. Time-stamped photos, notes with specific details, witnesses who can corroborate. That's very thorough. What I need you to do is email your documentation to this address. She gave me an email, ethicsreportscompany.com. I'll send it tonight. Include your employee ID number if you want updates on the investigation. If you want to remain completely anonymous, you can omit it, but you won't receive status updates. I'll include it. I spent 3 hours that night organizing everything into a PDF. I created a timeline. I embedded the photos. I wrote detailed descriptions of each violation. The email I sent was professional and factual. Subject: Policy Violations by Director Cynthia Blackwell. To whom it may concern, I am submitting this report regarding multiple policy violations by Cynthia Blackwell, Director of Operations at the Phoenix Call Center. Attached, please find documentation of 63 separate policy violations from February 3rd through April 22nd. These violations include attendance policy violations, 42 instances of arriving late to work, totaling 468 minutes of tardiness, break policy violations, 15 instances of taking breaks exceeding the 15-minute limit, phone policy violations, 21 instances of personal phone usage during work hours, some calls exceeding 30 minutes, desk policy violations, 8 instances of eating at desk outside break times, early departure violations, 19 instances of leaving before scheduled end of view. Shift per Section 14.3 of the Employee Handbook. All policies apply equally to all employees, regardless of position. Per the attendance policy implemented by Ms. Blackwell on February 3rd, employees are fined $50 per minute for tardiness. Based on the documented violations, Ms. Blackwell owes approximately $23,400 $50 in attendance fines alone, plus additional fines for other policy violations totaling approximately $8,150. I am requesting that these policies be enforced equally as stated in the employee handbook. If Ms. Blackwell is exempt from the policies she created, I am requesting clarification on why these policies do not apply to management staff. I have additional witnesses who can corroborate these violations if needed. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Employee ID 47829. I attached the PDF. It was 47 pages long, every violation documented in excruciating detail. I hovered my cursor over the send button for a full minute. If I sent this, there was a chance nothing would happen. There was a chance they'd fire me instead. There was a chance Cynthia would find out it was me and make my life even worse. But I thought about Patricia crying over her diabetic daughter, about Terrell's mother having a stroke, about Kim's son with a broken arm, about Jenny being terrified she couldn't afford rent because of fines. I clicked send. It was 11:47 p.m. Then I closed my laptop and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my brain running through every possible outcome. Most of them were bad. For 3 days, nothing happened. Cynthia continued her normal routine. Showed up late every morning, Starbucks in hand, personal cell phone pressed to her ear, left early every afternoon, took long lunches, fined people for being 30 seconds late returning from break. I started to think maybe nothing would happen. Maybe corporate didn't care. Maybe the ethics hotline was just for show. Then on April 25th, a Thursday morning, 2 people from corporate HR arrived unannounced. They badged in at exactly 8 a.m. I saw them through the glass doors. A woman in her 50s wearing a gray pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase. A younger guy, maybe 30, with a tablet and a messenger bag. They went straight to reception. We're here to see Cynthia Blackwell. The receptionist called Cynthia's extension. There are people here from corporate to see you. 2 minutes later, Cynthia came out of her office. She wasn't smiling. Can I help you? I'm Dorothy Chen from HR. This is Andrew Walsh. We need to speak with you privately. I'm not scheduled for any meetings with HR today. This is unscheduled. Conference room, please. They went to conference room A. The door closed. Through the glass walls, I could see Cynthia sitting at the table, Dorothy and Andrew across from her. They had a laptop open. They were showing her something on the screen. Cynthia's face went from confused to angry to pale in the span of about 2 minutes. We could hear raised voices but couldn't make out words. The entire office was silent. Everyone had stopped pretending to work. We were all watching through the glass. At 9:15 a.m., Cynthia stood up abruptly. She said something sharp and pointed. Dorothy said something back, calm and firm. Cynthia's face went red. She walked out of the conference room and went straight to her office, came back out carrying a cardboard box, her personal items, the framed photo of her and her husband from Cabo, the desk nameplate that said Cynthia Blackwell, Director, the motivational books from her shelf. She didn't look at anyone, just walked straight to the exit, head high, jaw tight. As she passed my desk, I kept my eyes on my computer screen. My heart was hammering so hard I thought she might hear it. The door closed behind her. Dorothy and Andrew came out of the conference room. Dorothy cleared her throat. Can I have everyone's attention, please? The floor went silent. Effective immediately, Cynthia Blackwell is no longer with the company. Brian Thompson will return as Interim Director of Operations starting Monday. All policies implemented since February 3rd are suspended pending review by corporate HR. We'll be conducting individual meetings with staff over the next week to gather feedback on workplace conditions. Thank you for your patience during this transition. People started whispering immediately. I kept my head down. Also, Dorothy continued, any fines that were assessed under the suspended policies will be refunded in your next paycheck. If you have questions about the refund process, please see me or Andrew before we leave today. The room erupted. People were crying. Jenny grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? They're refunding the fines. At 2 p.m., I got an email from Dorothy. Please come to conference room B at your earliest convenience. My stomach dropped. This was it. They knew it was me. I was about to get fired for reporting her. I walked to conference room B on shaking legs. Dorothy and Andrew were sitting at the table with their laptops open. They looked professional, serious, not angry, but not friendly either. Please sit, Dorothy said. I sat. My mouth was dry. My hands were in my lap so they wouldn't see them shaking. You submitted the ethics complaint about Cynthia Blackwell? No point in lying. Yes, ma'am. Your documentation was extremely thorough. Can you tell me how you compiled it? I started noticing she wasn't following the policies she'd created. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, but then I started keeping notes, just for myself. Then I realized how serious it was. Dorothy nodded. We've completed our preliminary investigation. We reviewed badge-in records, security camera footage, email logs, and phone records for the time period you specified. Andrew turned his laptop to show me a spreadsheet. Everything you reported was accurate. In fact, we found additional violations you didn't document. My eyes widened. Additional violations? Ms. Blackwell violated company attendance policies 468 times over a 3-month period. That's not just minutes late. That's individual instances of tardiness. Some days she was late multiple times, arriving late, returning late from lunch, and leaving early. Dorothy pulled up something on her laptop. She also violated phone usage policies 237 times, including personal calls during mandatory staff meetings. Break policies were violated 89 times. Early departure violations totaled 127 instances, and she submitted false time card data to payroll 63 times, claiming she worked worked hours she demonstrably did not work. I couldn't speak, just sat there staring. Based on the fine structure she implemented, which, by the way, was never approved by corporate and violated several state labor laws, she would owe the company approximately $94,000 in fines. My voice came out as a whisper. $94,000? Obviously, we're not going to fine her that amount. The entire fine system is being eliminated, but we are terminating her employment for cause, which means she forfeits her severance package. That would have been $85,000. She's really fired? She's really fired. We're also requiring her to repay any personal expenses she charged to her corporate card that weren't legitimate business expenses. That's another $12,000. And we're implementing new oversight procedures to ensure this type of abuse doesn't happen at any of our facilities. I felt dizzy, like I might pass out. Andrew spoke up. We also wanted to thank you. Most employees don't report violations because they're afraid of retaliation. The fact that you documented everything so carefully and reported it through proper channels potentially saved this company from a massive lawsuit. Dorothy smiled for the first time. Several employees have already contacted employment lawyers about the fines. If this had continued, we could have been looking at a class action lawsuit worth millions. You prevented that. I couldn't watch her destroy people anymore. That's exactly the kind of integrity we need in leadership positions, Dorothy said. Which brings me to my next question. How would you feel about a promotion? I blinked. What? We need a new quality assurance lead. The position reports directly to Brian, and your primary responsibility would be monitoring policy compliance and employee relations. It comes with a $12,000 salary increase, better benefits, and your own office. You're offering me a promotion after I reported my manager? We're offering you a promotion because you demonstrated exceptional judgment, attention to detail, and commitment to fairness. Those are exactly the qualities we need in someone who will be helping us rebuild trust with the staff here. I stared at them. This didn't feel real. Can I think about it? Of course. We'll need an answer by Monday. I took the weekend to think about it, but honestly, I knew my answer before I even left the conference room. On Monday morning, I accepted the promotion. The next week, Brian came back as director. First thing he did was call an all-staff meeting. I know the last few months have been difficult. I want you to know that things are going to change. We're going back to reasonable policies. We're going to treat people like adults again. And if you're 5 minutes late because of traffic, nobody's going to fine you half your rent. People actually applauded. He eliminated all of Cynthia's policies and returned us to the old handbook. People could be reasonably late without losing their entire paycheck. We went back to the original productivity standards. Phone policy went back to try not to use your phone excessively instead of $500 fine for checking a text. Morale improved overnight. People were smiling again. The parking lot stopped being a weird limbo zone where everyone sat terrified in their cars. My first paycheck in my new position included my refund from all of Cynthia's fines, $4,150. The money she'd taken from me for my car breaking down. I paid off my credit card debt, fixed my car properly, took Jenny out for an expensive dinner at a steakhouse to celebrate. 3 months later, in July, I ran into Cynthia at a Target. I was in the cleaning supplies aisle looking for dish soap. I turned the corner and there she was, 5 feet away, reaching for a bottle of generic laundry detergent. She saw me and froze. Her face went pale. Her hand dropped from the shelf. I could see she'd changed. She was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. Not a designer suit. Her hair was down instead of pulled back. She looked tired, older. There were dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a red basket with generic cereal, store-brand coffee, the cheapest version of everything. I watched her hands shake slightly as she put the detergent in her basket. She started to walk past me, head down, trying to avoid eye contact. I didn't move, just stood there in the middle of the aisle. As she got close, I checked my phone, made a show of looking at the time, 2:47 p.m. Then I looked up at her and smiled. Right on time, I said. Her face crumpled. Not crying, just this look of complete defeat. She walked past me without saying a word and disappeared around the corner. I finished my shopping, paid for my things, and went home. That night, I got a text from Jenny. Did you hear? Cynthia's working at a call center in Tempe, making $14 an hour. Same job we used to have. I put my phone down and smiled. Policy is policy.